Good evening. How are you? Well, today it's raining cats and dogs, as they say, which is kind of a crazy imagery. And so I'm going to sit and talk about a couple of things that concern me. One, of course, is the ongoing discussion about tariffs. And the other is about the Supreme Court decision that came down a few minutes before I'm taping this. And the only reason there'll be a longer length of time is because the bandwidth to upload what I'm saying to my pals, you people out there, is slow. And so if I did this from the office, it would be gone in a couple of minutes. But out here in the country, not so fast. So let me start with the tariffs. I find that the largest omission in our public discussion about Trump's tariff war is that Tariff planned this, I think, even when he was campaigning. Why was he talking about tariffs all the time? Who else was talking about tariffs? And the public apparently never understood how it could constitute a tax on you, because the increased cost of something because of a tariff when there was no comparable duty in America was going to reach into our pocketbooks a little further than without the tariff. That's the tax. That's the whole story about it. Now, we know he doesn't care what people think, but and he cares even less when they bloviate but don't fight back. So there are explanations, it seems to me, for why Trump went one way, then another way, and it was to set up his con. The sting was to cause chaos with high tariffs that would not change, so he'd say, making many desperate. And plainly we saw that. And those of you who are joining me in this discussion this evening, you had the same feeling as well. How will this affect me? Whether it be my retirement funds or going forward, or what money. There were so many, if you will, causes to be upset and chaotic. And that was by design, in my opinion, because the President of the United States, we're trained, is going to speak to us in a careful way. It may be wrong and we maybe disagree, but everything is coming down with this fellow all the time. So what he was saying is, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change. And that made people desperate. And he could have called this announcement the day of desperation or the day of offense. And I think that was calculated because it drove the market down. He had to know that was going to happen. This worldwide thing compared to previous tariffs that almost destroyed the world economy, not just the individual nation states involved, including America. And so that's what we had. So he said, there's a freeze. There'll be no negotiating. And he had all these people come out and say that. Now, the one secretary in his cabinet said, he knew this from the beginning. He knew what he was going to do. Well, if that's true, that goes toward my thesis, if you will, that this whole thing was a con. The con being what I'm now going to describe. Don't worry. Buy. Buy, even as the market's going down. And that's the key. The market goes down. You buy. And then he lifts the freeze so he can negotiate with the nation states, and then the market goes up, including Trump's. And so that's the con. And they're saying, he was thinking about it a couple of days and things like that. It's bullshit. He wasn't thinking about it. He planned it beforehand. This was the theater. He was dressing the stage. He was playing the con. He was doing the misdirection. He was doing what people do when they steal from others, when they commit fraud, when they do this kind of stuff. So when you hear an announcer say, I don't know what he was doing, what was he thinking? He prefers to be perceived as stupid, incompetent, or variable, too flexible, than to have us understand his con. But he's the kind of guy, he'll be bragging about it in another couple of weeks or so, because nobody does anything to him. So that's one piece that's bothered me, and that's why this evening, though it's been a pretty busy day, I have a case going on in Montana, and we had a meeting of the Soil and Water Board, and that was very stimulating. Both were stimulating. So, but here I am now. And just before I was going to have this opportunity to talk to you, I saw the Supreme Court came down with a decision. And so I listened to several minutes of the talking heads. But I did what I think is the best thing you can do in this circumstance, is I got a copy of the order. And it's only, 4 pages. And I thought, we can't always do this because decisions are two things. They're longer and they're more complicated, and they use a lot of legalese that we use. And occasionally when people don't know what they're doing, they introduce Latin. When I was studying Latin for 4 years in high school with the Jesuits, we got to the point where we would say, oh yeah, the declension of a word, spitto, spittere, spitui, splash. So this is the thing that we do. And those of you out there who remember any Latin, say to yourself, what in English does fidem clam sciat mean? So I leave that with you. So I'm going to spend a few minutes, and hopefully it won't be too clumsy. I'm going to look at the document, and I'm going to describe some things in it. And this is a good exercise both for us who do law all the time and people who say, they sort of dress this up in some sort of druidic fashion that no one can understand. This is about people. And the people we're talking about is Kilmar Armando Abreu Garcia. Apologies for my accent. I love to hear it, but I don't know that I can even possibly duplicate it. Now, what has the United States said about it? In this per curiam order, which is a short order, and then there are separate opinions attached, in which Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, is with other government agencies charged. And the case is therefore about releasing Kilmar Armando Abreu Garcia. And why do we want to release him? Because he never should have been in custody, and particularly he should never be sent to an El Salvadoran jail or prison. The United States, this is what the opinion says, the United States acknowledges that Abreu Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal. Now, the United States admitted this was an administrative error. That's in the decision. Now, but they say, this guy, he's been found to be a member of a gang, MS-13. And the Garcia family comes back and says he's not a member. He's never been arrested. He's been in the United States and not done anything at all. So the bad conduct of the campaign in America, maybe all campaigns, now involves, what do I need to say? I just lie. Hey, it got Trump elected, right? Ultimately, he lied. We had a January 6th insurrection, and we kept saying that we were protesting because they stole the election when there was no evidence of it. So there's already been this distance between the truth and a lie in almost every case, and it's the grab and hurt and punch role of Trump in order to bring to himself the power that he wants so badly, I guess, to fill this huge vacuum of useless, evil garbage that's inside of him. Okay, so now the Supreme Court granted in part and denied in part the order of the judge, which said, get him back. And it was supposed to happen days ago. So the part that they can't grant is because the time has passed on one thing. So they can't go back to that, right? So we're in a different place. And I think this is a little bit of lawyering to give elbow room to Trump to defy this order. Now, I'm a suspicious guy, but I've been walking this planet for a few years, and I've seen how people, when cornered, in this case Trump's government, even by his personally selected justices, takes advantage of that situation. So the deadline is no longer effective. So that part of the case, it has to be handled a different way. We can't say you should have been there several days ago because it didn't happen. But that allows them to talk about how do we do it. And the Supreme Court says the order requires the government to facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. What does the word facilitate mean? What if instead of facilitate, I said do, make it happen, done, you messed it up. And if you don't, I'm going to hold you in contempt. How about you? I'll do you. I'll put you in contempt. Now, the intended scope of the term in the district court's order, he has a word effectuate. So we have facilitate, and we have effectuate. Now, doesn't effectuate sound more determinative? And that was the judge's order. And the Supreme Court has added facilitate. And the district court said effectuate, make it happen. That's a difference that we'll watch in the days ahead. Now, if you or I were running the government and we ran out this stupid excuse, perhaps we even believed in it, and the judge said, get him back here, wouldn't we want to move heaven and earth to have him back in a day? But we don't want to admit that we ever do anything wrong. That's been the real, well, one of the principal sins, and the friend, if you will, of lying is always denying. And that is a trump mark of advocacy. It's never beautiful, it's clumsy, it's terrible. He's not a great speaker. He hums, he does stuff, he talks like a child, he talks like a kid on the street without any with any weight of wisdom or belief or trust. He's just out there roaming, doing things, hurting people all the time. So among the things the court said is the district court should clarify its directive, that is, to get him back here, with due regard for the deference owed by the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. Excuse me. We contracted or supplied to El Salvador a person that has no business being in custody there in contradiction of our laws. What world affairs are involved? This is another bullshit word. We have the facilitate word, and we have the conduct of foreign affairs. Like there's some sacrosanct thing. We go into this. There's a Gnosticism about knowing what these people believe, which is whatever is handy, whatever theory they think can get away with it. I was once with a very talented political organizer, and we were working on a campaign together, and he actually worked on my campaign as my campaign manager for a while. And one day we're putting up bumper strips, and putting them on these walls. And so we had a bumper strip, and we put it up, and it was at an angle. He put it at an angle. And I said, what about this? What kind of work is that, And he says, oh, no, it was meant that way. They'll notice it that way. That joke is what happens when it becomes big matters, and you just lie about it. That's Trump. Now, that in essence is what the entire court could agree to say. But then Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, they joined to make additional comments, which were really criticisms of how this matter was being handled, or to explain how it should appropriately be handled. And it said, the government has cited no basis in law for Garcia's warrantless arrest, his removal to El Salvador, his confinement in a Salvadoran prison, nor could it. That's what the three justices said. The government remains bound by an immigration judge's 2019 order. The 2019 order is the one that says Garcia may not go to El Salvador. Now, and the reason for that was, and this is what the court said in 2019, he faced a clear probability of future persecution. Future persecution, that's why he shouldn't go there, and we sent him there? Now that's not just a simple omission, like I misspelled your name and we couldn't find you for several days, but you were supposed to be wherever you were. This is the underlying reason he should be released is because to go there is to put his life at risk. And I know you've seen these stories and so forth, and some of you have dealt with law enforcement as I have, and you know that things can happen in prison that aren't supposed to happen, just like things are happening in America that shouldn't be happening in America. And so it would be inconvenient to the Garcia family the longer this goes on, because we do not know what could happen to Mr. Garcia. The court said, the additional three justices, instead of hastening to correct its egregious error, the government dismissed it as an oversight. It was just an oversight. Was it really? Or did they do this purposefully? Or did they figure this would draw attention because somebody would say it, and then they would have this clash, and their people would be supporting this heinous act, and we would be around saying, whoa, you can't do that. Now, They didn't count on a judge perhaps making this ruling because they're so used to successfully intimidating everybody that they thought they could do it in this case. Now, what was their answer? Now, you didn't have to go to Columbia, Yale, Harvard, or any of these places, or any law school in America. In fact, all you had to do is exist to deal with the responding argument by the government. They request an order permitting it to leave Garcia there in El Salvador, a husband and a father without a criminal record. And, you know, the thing about it is, they say the United States cannot, excuse me for looking down, but I want to get the words exactly right. The United States courts cannot grant relief once a deportee crosses the border. That's the government. Oh, you left America, and you can't do anything about our screw up. That's the way it is. Suffer, and you know you may be there the rest of your natural life, and we're not concerning about that. So that's the kind of stuff that we have here. Now, there are a couple of things that are interesting. The court says this shocks the conscience, what they're doing here. And one of my favorite justices, perhaps my most preferred, is William O. Douglas. And it's because he spoke in plain English, as brilliant as he was. And I wanted to meet him in person, and so when I graduated from Columbia, where he had strong connections, we arranged to have a speaker, and I and others convinced the group to have Douglas come. And I thought that would be terrific. And when we were walking around and talking, and even in the public speech he made as part of his appearance, he was talking about things so shocking to the conscience that the way he defined it as a physical experience is this the vomit test. It makes you so sick that you want to expunge this. And he understood it in a base way because he knew people from where he came from didn't go to the Supreme Court. They didn't clerk for judges. And I, of course, asked him when he was on this if he would be interested in having me as a clerk. And he said he only takes clerks from where he was in Washington. And I said, I can move there. So that wasn't enough. And he told me I wouldn't want the job because he wrote everything. Well, I think he was tantalizing at the moment when he did that. So what should have happened here in a general way so this didn't happen? Due process of law. And that's just fundamental fairness. It's not anything more complicated than that. And at the basic it is, I say, this is what I'm charging you with. Notice. You know, it's not Kafkaesque. In this case, it's been described as Kafkaesque because what are they doing? Why is he there? They're wrong and they don't care. And they say the fact that even though it's wrong, he crossed over some border, the United States is no longer responsible, which is pretty ironic given we got our fingers and everything all around the planet. But, you know, we couldn't help this guy out of a prison in which we're probably forwarding money to subsidize this effort. But, okay, let's put that aside. So the government calls it an oversight and does nothing. How does that possibly work? How does that work? And so we're stuck a little bit with these words, and it remains to be seen if the government, that is Department of Justice and company, and all the various agencies that may be involved, are they going to use these words and say, I can't do that, we can't do this, hoping that he will fade from visibility to the public, and then we don't care what happened to him. We'll read about it a couple of years from now. And the poor wife will be upset and will say that's terrible, and we'll all be responsible because we did nothing to stop it. Now, the Supreme Court has created a situation giving a lot of elbow room to the government. It's our job to tell every damn elected official in America that this will not stand, that we cannot put up with this. This is not right. And when in due process, you tell somebody the charges, she, the person, the entity gets an opportunity to be heard. And this is all public, and we all know what it is. But the theme running through all of this is what dictators do. You don't need due process. I know you did it. They don't care if they did it or not, because This savage way is to create more uncertainty. You may use it for a con in the traffic situation, and you use it the same thing, this terror, this fear that Woodward mentioned in his book from his interview with Trump. What is power? Power is fear. Fear is power. And that's how Trump operates. So those are two things. Now, the third thing that, as I made this impromptu discussion with you that comes to mind is we have a situation where if we're in this room, the system, and we want something fair to happen and we have to open a door, increasingly the doors are closing. Our greatest fear, our righteous greatest fear, is that there'll be no exit. And the doors that were there, if they remain, they will be guarded by Trump's servants. And they won't have independence to think the right way, as suggested even in this case involving Mr. Garcia. And I think I've probably said this before, but you can't propitiate an evil God. That is to say, if you and I say to Trump, how could you do this to this man? Oh, he had a marking on his body. It has nothing to do with gangs. He's really a member of a gang, and we bring him back. What is he going to do? Run through the streets attacking people? This is the fear that they run on. So America's in a difficult place. We're in a difficult place because the con man is now conning our nation and the world. I don't know what's the simple way to describe this guy? This evil force of submission and terror and coercion just so he can have power is exactly the opposite of a system that depends on laws and process and order and fairness and equity, and therefore the trust of the people. The people, once they don't trust the government, anything is possible. And that's what we're dealing with. And so every day that you can, you got to email somebody, write somebody, give $15 more or $5, whatever you can give to the ACLU. The interest groups that you see are in a litigation of the sort that you agree with, send them funds. Because we have to push back, not with fear, but with the force of what is just and right and true and lawful. And so that's our answer to this. We don't have any other answer. And I've been in campaigns in which people try to steal the misconduct of their opponent. Then who can tell the difference between us and them? If we aren't at our best, doing our best, then we're no better than they are. And as soon as the public sees that, we're trapped. Nothing can happen. And if you say, well, just do this and it's not going to happen to us and so forth. We've all seen the movies about what happened with other dictators, and that's what we have to avoid here. So I've gone on a little bit, and it's easier because it's not raining here. And I look forward to talking tomorrow, and perhaps it'll be dry and maybe even warm. All the best. Bye-bye.